Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a pretty provocative premise, one that gets right to the structural and psychological roots of poverty. I mean, the title alone, Why Most People Stay Poor Forever, it really makes you stop and confront an uncomfortable reality, right? We're not just looking at bank accounts or spreadsheet deficits today. We're exploring the actual architecture of a cycle that keeps millions of people stuck exactly where they are. Think about it. If getting ahead was purely just a matter of hard work, the hardest working people on the planet wouldn't so often be the poorest. So there's a missing link here. We're going to look way beyond the basic math of income versus expenses and decode the invisible forces at play.
So, let's dive right in by asking a foundational question. Is being poor just a temporary financial state? A math problem where you just need to earn a little more and spend a little less? Or are there invisible, deeply rooted behavioral barriers working behind the scenes? When you really look closely, the conversation shifts fast from just dollars and cents straight into human psychology. In fact, research into financial psychology reveals something kind of startling. Living under the constant, heavy threat of scarcity temporarily lowers your effective IQ. It's something called cognitive load. When your brain is obsessing, literally obsessing, over how to keep the lights on this week, you just have less mental bandwidth to plan for next year. Poverty isn't just an empty wallet, it's an overwhelming cognitive burden.
To truly grasp how this all works, we're going to cover, first, the poverty trap explained, then habits under scarcity, followed by deeply rooted beliefs, the vicious cycle, and finally, questioning the forever.
All right, jumping into Section 1, the poverty trap explained, and really looking at the massive scale of this issue.
The word trapped here, it's used very deliberately. Think about what a trap actually is. It's a mechanism. It implies that external and internal forces are actively working to hold a person in place, completely regardless of how hard they struggle to get out. We aren't talking about people choosing to stay where they are out of laziness or lack of ambition. It's a restrictive environment that functions exactly like a snare. Imagine trying to run a race, but the track itself is made of quicksand. Things like predatory payday loans, a lack of accessible healthcare, or those brutal punitive overdraft fees, they aren't just minor inconveniences. They are literally the jaws of the trap snapping shut. Understanding poverty as a structural trap, that fundamentally changes how we have to look at the solution.
And this brings us to the sheer scale of the phenomenon. We are talking about millions of individuals. And look, whenever you have millions of people caught in the exact same dynamic, you have to stop looking at individual failure and start looking at a widespread, systemic reality. If one person falls into a hole, well, maybe they were just clumsy, but if millions of people are falling into that exact same hole, yeah, there is a severe problem with the design of the sidewalk. A trap this effective isn't an accident, it's practically an ecosystem. It relies on consistency to maintain itself, but how exactly does it keep running so smoothly across so many different lives? Well, that brings us to the human element.
Moving on to Section 2, Habits Under Scarcity, which is essentially the visible surface of the iceberg. We're talking about the observable, daily routines. But here's the crucial context you have to remember. These behaviors are formed under intense, crushing scarcity. When resources are incredibly tight, your brain actually shifts gears. The habits you develop become completely survival-based, short-term reactions. Decision fatigue sets in super fast. Just think about the habit of, say, putting off a $50 car repair today so you can buy groceries, even though you know that practically guarantees a $500 engine breakdown next month. From the outside, sure, that looks like a terrible financial habit. But from the inside, under the massive weight of immediate scarcity, it's literally the only logical move to survive until Friday. It's these daily, forced actions, compounding over time, that maintain the status quo and keep that trap tightly shut.
Next up is Section 3, Deeply Rooted Beliefs, diving into the invisible psychology behind all this.
You see, habits don't just spring out of nowhere. Think of it like this. Your beliefs are the operating system, and your habits are just the software programs running on top of it. Poverty isn't just maintained by physical, observable actions. It's held in place by deeply entrenched psychological frameworks. If your foundational belief is that the system is totally rigged against you, or if learned helplessness has kicked in because every single attempt you've made to get ahead has been met with a penalty, your brain adapts to that reality. If you believe investing in the future is pointless because some financial crisis is always just around the corner, why on earth would you save? You wouldn't. These deeply held convictions about money, about self-worth, about what is practically possible, these form the invisible but incredibly impenetrable walls of the trap.
Notice the really powerful contrast happening here. On the left side, we have the physical reality, habits. Those are the observable behaviors, like skipping bills or reactionary spending. Then on the right side, the internal reality. Beliefs. That's the invisible psychology, like a scarcity mindset or learned helplessness. And this matters immensely, guys, because treating only one side will absolutely never break the trap. Imagine a well-meaning advisor swooping in and trying to forcefully change someone's habits, like, putting them on some strict, unyielding budget without ever addressing the invisible operating system driving them. It will inevitably fail. The unaddressed beliefs are going to eventually trigger a total system crash, bringing those old habits right back. It is a dual-engine mechanism keeping people locked in their current state. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the vicious cycle, and how these habits and beliefs actually interact.
We can map this out as a vicious, totally self-sustaining loop. It usually kicks off with a deeply ingrained belief about scarcity. Maybe that exhausting, persistent idea that I'm never going to get ahead no matter how hard I work. That internal belief then naturally triggers a reactive, short-term daily habit. For example, ignoring a pile of past due bills because the mental stress of looking at them is just way too high to bear. And because this exact thing is happening on a massive scale, millions of people remain trapped by these repetitive, survival-based reactions. The overarching condition of poverty is maintained, and then, here's the kicker, that reality loops right back around to reinforce the initial belief. When the electricity finally gets shut off, it just confirms the thought. See, I told you I'd never get ahead. The environment creates the belief dictates the action, and the action guarantees the environment never changes.
Finally, let's look at Section 5. Questioning the forever, confronting the ultimate consequence of this cycle.
We really need to confront the most definitive and, frankly, chilling word in this whole analysis: forever. The assertion that most people will stay in this cycle perpetually is just an incredibly heavy thought. Forever implies an infinite loop with absolutely no exit ramp. It forces us to look at this systemic loop we've just unpacked and ask a really hard question. Is this complex interaction of habits and beliefs truly inescapable? The grim reality we have to face is that breaking out is so incredibly difficult precisely because you're fighting a brutal war on two fronts at the exact same time: the invisible mind and the visible environment. You are actively fighting external systems designed to extract your wealth while simultaneously trying to rewrite the internal software that is adapted to survive that very extraction.
But I want to leave you with a final, slightly more hopeful, provocative thought. If poverty is maintained by this very specific interplay of habits and beliefs, is acknowledging them the first crucial step to ensuring forever isn't actually a guarantee? Think about it. If a trap is made of mechanics that we can finally understand, if we can map the exact points where scarcity mindsets and survival habits lock together, doesn't identifying those mechanisms finally give us the key to dismantling them? The cycle might be self-sustaining, sure, but it is definitely not unbreakable once you finally see how the gears turn. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the structures around you.